In the summer of 1964, a series of events in the waters off the coast of North Vietnam would catalyze one of the most consequential escalations in American military history. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, as it came to be known, was presented to the American public as an unprovoked attack on U.S. naval vessels, demanding swift and decisive retaliation. Yet beneath the official narrative lay a complex web of covert operations, and deliberate distortions that would later be revealed as a calculated maneuver to justify deeper U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. The secrets of the Gulf of Tonkin Incident, once buried in classified documents and obscured by political rhetoric, now stand as a stark reminder of how governments can manipulate events to serve strategic ends. On August 2, 1964, the USS Maddox, a U.S. Navy destroyer, was conducting an intelligence-gathering mission known as a DeSoto Patrol in the Gulf of Tonkin. These patrols were designed to collect signals intelligence and monitor North Vietnamese coastal defenses. The Maddox was operating in international waters but in close proximity to the North Vietnamese coast, where it had been shadowed by North Vietnamese patrol boats. That day, 3 P-4 torpedo boats approached the Maddox, prompting a confrontation. The Maddox fired warning shots, and a firefight ensued. With air support from the USS Ticonderoga, the Maddox repelled the attack, damaging the North Vietnamese boats and suffering only minor damage itself. This skirmish, while significant, was not unprecedented and did not result in American casualties. 2 days later, on the night of August 4th, the Maddox, now joined by the USS Turner Joy, reported a second attack. The ships claimed to have detected torpedo wakes and engaged in evasive maneuvers, firing hundreds of shells into the darkness. However, as the night wore on, doubts began to emerge. Radar and sonar readings were inconsistent, and no visual confirmation of enemy vessels was obtained. Communications between the ships and command centers were riddled with uncertainty. Captain John Herrick, commanding the Maddox, began to question whether an attack had occurred at all, suggesting that the readings might have been caused by bad weather or overzealous sonar operators. Despite these doubts, the reports were relayed to Washington, where they were interpreted as a second act of aggression. President Lyndon B. Johnson, already under pressure to respond to perceived communist expansion in Southeast Asia, seized upon the incident as a justification for military escalation. On August 5th, he addressed the nation, declaring that the United States had been the victim of repeated attacks and would respond accordingly. That same day, U.S. aircraft launched retaliatory strikes against North Vietnamese targets. Within days, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting Johnson broad authority to use military force in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. The resolution passed with overwhelming support, and the United States began a rapid buildup of troops and resources in Vietnam, setting the stage for a conflict that would last more than a decade and claim millions of lives. The official narrative of the Gulf of Tonkin incident remained largely unchallenged for years. It was not until the release of declassified documents and tapes in the early 2000s that the full extent of the deception became clear. These materials revealed that high-ranking officials, including Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, were aware of the ambiguities surrounding the second attack, but chose to present it as a confirmed event. Internal communications showed that doubts were suppressed and intelligence was selectively presented to support the case for war. The National Security Agency's own analysis later concluded that no North Vietnamese attack had occurred on August 4th and that the incident had been misrepresented to the public and Congress. The broader context of the Gulf of Tonkin incident adds further layers to its complexity. At the time, the United States was supporting covert operations against North Vietnam, including commando raids and sabotage missions conducted by South Vietnamese forces under Operation 34A. These operations were known to the North Vietnamese and likely contributed to their defensive posture. The DeSoto patrols, while officially reconnaissance missions, were closely coordinated with these covert activities, blurring the line between observation and provocation. The presence of U.S. ships in the area was not neutral. It was part of a broader strategy to pressure and destabilize the North Vietnamese regime. The manipulation of the Gulf of Tonkin incident reflects a recurring pattern in the use of intelligence and military force. By framing the events as unprovoked aggression, the Johnson administration was able to bypass the constitutional requirement for a declaration of war and rally public support for intervention. The incident became a textbook example of how perceived threats can be amplified and exploited to achieve political objectives. It also highlighted the dangers of relying on incomplete or ambiguous intelligence in matters of war and peace. The consequences of the Gulf of Tonkin incident were profound and far-reaching. The Vietnam War escalated rapidly, with U.S. troop levels peaking at over 500,000 by 1969. The conflict became a quagmire marked by brutal combat, widespread destruction, and deep divisions within American society. The war eroded public trust in government, fueled anti-war movements, and led to a reevaluation of U.S. foreign policy. The credibility gap, the disconnect between official statements and reality, became a defining feature of the ERA. In retrospect, the Gulf of Tonkin incident serves as a cautionary tale about the intersection of intelligence, politics, and war. It underscores the importance of transparency, accountability, and critical scrutiny in democratic governance. The willingness of officials to distort facts and suppress dissenting views reveals the fragility of institutional checks and balances in times of crisis. It also raises enduring questions about the role of the media, the responsibility of elected representatives, and the ethical obligations of those who serve in government. The legacy of the Gulf of Tonkin incident continues to resonate in contemporary debates over military intervention and executive authority. It has been cited in discussions of the Iraq War, the use of drones, and the expansion of surveillance powers. The incident reminds us that the narratives used to justify war are often constructed, contested, and subject to revision. It challenges us to remain vigilant, to question official accounts, and to demand evidence and accountability before committing to conflict. The story of the Gulf of Tonkin is not merely a historical episode. It is a lens through which we can examine the dynamics of power, the manipulation of perception, and the consequences of secrecy. It invites us to reflect on the human cost of war and the moral responsibilities of leadership. It also affirms the importance of historical memory and the need to confront uncomfortable truths in the pursuit of justice and understanding. In the final analysis, the secrets of the Gulf of Tonkin incident reveal a government willing to bend reality to serve strategic ends, a public vulnerable to manipulation, and a system in which the pursuit of power can eclipse the pursuit of truth. They remind us that democracy is not self-sustaining, and that the integrity of our institutions depends on the courage of individuals to speak out, the vigilance of citizens to hold leaders accountable, and the commitment to principles that transcend expediency. The Gulf of Tonkin incident stands as a testament to the perils of unchecked authority and the enduring need for transparency, honesty, and ethical governance.